Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. To you, Ummi Muhammad, welcome to the mid-morning talk with myself. Ummi Muhammad, are you there? All right, let's just, while we fixing that, I know we've been always warned from our guests, if they have um, load shedding on their side, or if there is any technical issue, then for some reason we do have these kind of interruptions. But let's first just talk about the subject that we've chosen to speak about on our wellness segment today, psychology and wellness segment. So, the first symptoms, what is hoarding? I'm going to find that out from our expert guests. So, I'm not going to go into the actual definition yet until she can, in fact, answer us. Is Umi Muhammad there? Not yet.
Assalamu
All right.
alaikum.
Oh, there you go. All right. So we lost you there again for a bit. So I was introducing you in the subject. Let's quickly find out what is hoarding.
Okay, so hoarding as an illness is
Mm-hmm.
something that we do. I'm not sure if I heard you because I broke up if you mentioned clinical psychologist. I'm not a clinical psychologist. My expertise in this field is purely from the perspective of Islamic psychology. So I don't actually have the paperwork to use that title in South Africa. So just to clarify for the guests so there's no confusion.
Thank you for that.
Um, no problem. So when we look at hoarding, hoarding is when we hold on to things, and it becomes a problem when we are unable to let go, even if the items that we are hoarding is causing us pain or discomfort, or it's cluttering up our homes and making it difficult to live our lives. But we are unable to let go because this has now progressed into something that has become an illness. There are some triggers to what could cause hoarding. Sometimes it could be some type of anxiety, some type of trauma. Sometimes when someone loses a person and they're afraid of letting go, so they physically start holding on to what they can. If somebody's circumstances change drastically, they feel they have no control, so they, hold on to what they can. um, or if it's someone that just has a sense of inferiority and holding on to these things gives them a sense of security. That is a reason that a person could start hoarding. We
Mm-hmm.
also find there like OCD tendencies. People that have OCD, they
Mm-hmm.
find it very difficult to give up, and hoarding onto these things may soothe their triggers.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, and then what are the symptoms? Although you've defined the triggers, but what are the symptoms apart
So
from
if
what's
we look at
apparent?
it from,
Yeah.
yes, so if we look at it from the perspective of Islamic psychology, right?
Right.
Such a person would hold on to things. So besides the physical things, so when you think of a person hoarding, you think of an old lady living in this house with a cluttered, lots of clutter everywhere, and you can barely move around. But
Mm-hmm.
that is only one aspect. Islamically, and what we've been given in Quran are those people who withhold charity. So they do not spend from that which Allah Ta'ala has blessed them with. And Allah
Mm-hmm.
Ta'ala describes such people in the Quran, okay, as
Mm-hmm.
those who do not spend from what they've been given. And in Surah Al Imran, Allah Ta'ala tells us about those who greedily withhold Allah's bounties, thinking it is good for them. In fact, it is bad for them. They will be leashed by their necks on the day of judgment with whatever wealth they used to withhold. And Allah is the sole inheritor of the heavens and the earth, and Allah is all aware of what you do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so now we find ourselves with a little bit of a paradox, because we're saying that we're looking at miserliness from the perspective of an illness, and here
Correct.
is something so harsh, right? So this
Mm-hmm.
ayat gives a warning. But when we look at the way we approach the subject of miserliness from the perspective of Islamic psychology as opposed to the perspective of secular psychology,
Mm-hmm.
then it puts it into context a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
With secular psychology, what it is basically a study of human behavior, human emotion. So they start addressing the problem when it becomes apparent. Okay. So when this person now has a problem and now it's become so bad that they need help, that is when you would start treatment or intervention in the secular field. However,
Mm-hmm.
when we look at the Islamic perspective, we actually start from within. This is how we live our lives. This is our whole outlook on life as Muslims, and
Yeah.
we live in a holistic manner that prevents us from going down that road. So,
Mm-hmm.
if someone were to, for example, come across this ayah in Surah Al Imran early on in their life, or we are so encouraged to give from that which we love, because doing that from early on, learning to do that, prevents us from going down that road which could lead to us developing this hoarding and miserliness. So that's one contrast there.
Right. What are some of the reasons that may lead a person to developing a hoarding disorder?
Okay, so like we said, someone who is not mindful of the ayat and the warnings in Quran, right? So these warnings about miserliness are extremely strict. Okay, and even in Surah Baqarah somewhere, Allah Ta'ala says that you do not attain righteousness by turning your face to the right or to the left, but the way to attain righteousness or closeness to Allah Ta'ala is through service to others. And so when we realize that our purpose in life is gaining proximity to Allah Ta'ala, gaining this closeness in our relationship to Him, so we naturally gravitate and navigate towards those things that facilitate that closeness, and we move away from and avoid those things that will take us away. So there are many, many ayat in which Allah Ta'ala, praises those who are generous and giving, and um, admonishes those who are miserly. So if in that way, if we are someone who ignores these warnings, someone who develops an excessive love of this world, so love of things and gathering up the things of this world, and what we would call a greed for the things of this world, then that would lead us down the path that would lead to miserliness. From the Islamic perspective, these what we would call imbalances, right? So we have different systems in our body, and those who do more integrative medicine would know that if there's an imbalance in the system, it leads to dis-ease in that system. So when it comes to our spiritual bodies as well, if there is an imbalance, for example, a disproportionate love of the world, a disproportionate desire for wealth and fame, that would create an imbalance that would lead us towards these illnesses that would then manifest as hoarding, miserliness, OCD, etc.
Okay, now I agree with you on what you're saying in terms of the Islamic perspective and how we should be approaching um, the warnings, as it were, and our education around what Allah Ta'ala warns us against so that we don't suffer from these diseases, as it were. But then I find it quite contrasting in terms of miserliness in the, I'm not challenging, of course, what the Quran says, but I'm saying that with the way we understand it as a general definition,
Mm,
miserliness is being stingy in common terms, and it would be mainly the example used is with money, as it were. But now
mm,
hoarding, yes, can fall into
mm,
that theme or category. However, hoarding and collecting clutter
mm,
in your living spaces is actually what
mm,
creates an extremely difficult mental health
mm,
challenge, because that is an indication of something
mm,
else that's going on, apart from, of course, not being aware
mm.
of which is most important, of course, not being aware of how we should be living as Muslims. So there
Yes.
is this disease, actually. and
Yes.
it's categorized as a mental health problem. So we're talking
Yes.
about hoarding, and how
Mm,
is it that, this disorder, hoarding is a disorder. Um,
mm,
why are these items usually saved? Now, when does the habit start? Is it a learned behavior? It's your frame of reference. You grew up in a home like that. So
mm,
from the psychological perspective, that's what, yes, we would be looking at in terms of where did it all start. So you're talking about, when
mm.
we talk about the symptom, we know it's openly apparent. There's a lot of clutter around the person. They don't want to part with certain items or lots of items, whatever it might be. So much so that this disease can, or this disorder leads to a person not being able to even move around comfortably in their homes. That's an extreme
Yes.
example of hoarding as a disorder. So when one has this problem, we're looking at, like I was saying earlier, the cause you're
Mm,
saying is not being aware and conscientious as Muslims. The symptoms are obvious. So, why is this happening? From my little
mm.
bit that I read up on it and what I know about it, it can start at teenage years. So you hold on to things, or the like you said earlier, the if there's a person that's passed away and there's things you hold on to because you don't want to let go. That let go, in inverted commas, is also because they haven't dealt with the loss. They're still grieving. So, it's
Yes.
a very deep and broad subject. I've given all of those examples so that people who are not Muslim that are listening to us can also understand that we do know what,
Yes. Yes.
in a secular world, this means and where it comes from. So maybe we can just approach this subject on a broader level, so that we can help in some way of informing people who are tuned in.
No, definitely. When it once it becomes a disorder, and now this person is seen as someone who is ill, right? Then the way we treat it is very different. So we
Okay.
drew a contrast at the beginning where we said, in the secular perspective, the only way that they can diagnose such a disorder is when the symptoms become apparent. So,
Right.
so they would be at the end where now this person has a problem and now they need to seek help, and so they would go to maybe a psychologist, or their GP would refer them to a psychiatrist for help and treatment, right?
Mm.
um that is from the secular perspective. What I had explained previously was that we, from the Islamic perspective, we treat it at the root cause. So we say it
Correct.
starts as a spiritual imbalance,
Imbalance.
and if
Yes,
it's
yes.
treated in that, if it's treated at that point, inshallah, it will not progress to hoarding,
I
right?
understand. Yes.
However, we cannot deny or ignore the fact that there are people who suffer from this illness. It's very real. It's something that needs medical intervention. Okay.
Correct.
And once we reach that stage, so um, I would then, if such a person had to come to me, if this person is beyond the stage where I can help them, where this has now become an illness, I would refer them to a clinical psychologist who I work with and under supervision with, for that person to give them the specialized help that they need. Because
Hmm.
we must always remember that Islam recognizes the illness.
Correct.
Sometimes people feel that Islamic psychology sort of dismisses these illnesses. We don't. There is a place for it in Islam. There are very real structures in place to help such people. And part of that is making sure that they receive the specialized help that they require. In this case, if the person has trauma, like we said, a sudden death or a death of someone close, so you would hold on to things that remind you of that person.
Yes.
um, that person would then need to be reassured. That person, once they deal with the issue that's causing them to hold on to these things, they will, inshallah, naturally let go once that issue has been dealt with. If this person is someone who is hoarding because of OCD, OCD is also something that is very real and recognized in Islamic psychology, something
Correct.
that is termed waswasa al-qahri. There's very specific treatments for that. And it may be treatments that are more spiritual in nature,
Mm-hmm.
coupled with mental health, medical treatment as well. So it's not, that we isolate it and we treat it alone, ignoring the medical field. It's often done in conjunction with, because if someone is showing signs of mental illness or mental instability, this may be one thing that we picked up, but there may be underlying factors that we didn't pick up that may
Correct.
require very real medical intervention. So, we can always talk about, the symptoms and how to treat it and whatever, but there are always underlying causes that require medical
Absolutely.
treatment. And we always encourage such individuals to see a specialist physician in this field.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And thank you for clarifying that so eloquently. So let's talk about the disorder itself. How you've spoken about how you treat it, basically, because we don't have enough time. But what is the process in dealing with this type of mental illness? So I think you've already in some way answered the question, but I think a lot of people might not um, consider themselves as someone who suffers from this disorder. So maybe we should just go through some of the symptoms. We have just about well, I'm just seeing whether we can continue with this interview after the break, or do we all right, so we have a bit of time, Umi Mohammed. I beg your pardon for that
Okay.
interruption. For
No, that's fine.
example, getting and keeping too many items that you may not have a need for right now and don't have space for, but you still keep it, or ongoing difficulty throwing out or parting with things regardless of their actual value. So these are some of the symptoms that might help to
Hmm.
categorize anyone who's listening or anyone who might need help. I'm going to ask you to answer this question after the break.
Okay.
Masterpiece. Droplets of gold inspires precious design. Platinum bursts with intricate freshness, and every pure diamond becomes more than just a girl's best friend. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, where timeless dreams become a reality. Come to us. We tailor-make designer gold, platinum, and diamond jewelry. Trade in or remodel your old gold. Clad yourself with classy name-branded watches. We offer insurance valuation and freezer card calculation. Visit us at 534 Ridge Road, Overport, or call 031 208 9142. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, manufacturers of fine gold and diamond jewelry.
When the perfect blend of stylish decor, exquisite halal cuisine, and warm hospitality come together, it could only mean Al Bayt Lodge, your true home away from home. Al Bayt is the ideal heaven for families, business people, and tourists, with its 4-star family rooms and other luxurious facilities, conveniently situated close to Port Elizabeth Airport, the beach, and other amenities. Your stay will be truly unforgettable, as you'll be taking home lasting memories of the warm hospitality, the serenity and tranquility that Al Bayt has to offer. For reservations, call 041 583 6415 or visit www.albaytlodge.co.za.
Africa Muslims Agency invites you to visit us at our new office space on 31 West Street, Houghton Estate, Johannesburg. The new AMA office will provide a space to connect, share, volunteer, and donate in the heart of the community. Find out more about how you can make an impact with your zakah this Ramadan. Office hours are 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. daily. Call us on 0100 722 262. Africa Muslims Agency, empowering, educating, inspiring.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042 203 1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
You know, it's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. Naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one. Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
Deadly earthquakes struck Turkey and Syria, leaving communities devastated and in dire need of assistance. Over 8,000 buildings and homes were reduced to rubble. Over 9,000 people have been confirmed dead, with hundreds of thousands seriously injured. Families and communities are in disarray as search and rescue operations continue day and night. Islamic relief teams are on the ground providing vital emergency relief to the affected communities. Your support enables us to provide food, medical care, and emergency shelter. Donate now and help us save lives. Visit www.islamic-relief.org.za.
Breaking stereotypes, moving boundaries, joining hands. Salam Media. Humanity sets the agenda.
We're back with our very special guest, Ummi Muhammad. We're talking about hoarding in our wellness psychology segment this morning. She is a member of the South African Institute of Islamically Integrated Wellness, the official body for Islamic psychology and counseling in South Africa. We appreciate you extending your time with us, Ummi Muhammad.
Assalamu alaikum. It's only a pleasure. Jazakallah for having me.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. So before the break, I was talking about some of the symptoms, and perhaps you can just add to that and explain what it is that people should be actually aware of.
Okay, so we don't want to scare people, right? Because a lot of people collect things. For example, people like fancy pens, or, when we were younger, we would collect these fancy papers and stickers. So people do have a tendency to collect things, okay? That's within reason, it's normal. So people may like, fancy notebooks. So you buy these notebooks and you keep them, even if you're thinking, okay, I will write in them, but you don't write in them. And then the next time you go out, you see another pretty one and think, okay, I like this notebook, and then you add it to your collection. So that is within the range of normal, right? We wouldn't class that as a disorder.
Right.
However, when it becomes a disorder is when you see, like you mentioned, there's stacks of clutter, and this now is hampering a person's movement. We may find old people, tripping and falling over those things, right? So we have to understand that this person does not have the mental and maybe physical capacity to clear out the clutter. This is where family comes in. So family can help with that. Once the person realizes that they have a problem and they need help, CBT is one such treatment that works wonders for them. So being
Right.
aware of these thoughts, being conscious that, this is not something that's real, dealing with the underlying emotion, becoming more aware, maybe journaling, helping them, doing this with a professional. Right. So you go to a psychologist, you get yourself treated. Okay. Once you've been diagnosed, you work with your professional, do this journaling under their supervision. And then family and friends or community or caregivers can get involved in removing the clutter, because that person themselves cannot be left to do it. They are
Yes,
incapable.
right.
Even sometimes family may think if the person is a hoarder, sometimes a child, right? A child may develop this hoarding disorder. And,
Mhm.
the parents will think, ah, let's, just let them have it. They will not be screaming and throwing a tantrum or whatever. So in that way, family actually enables this behavior. And that is something that we should be mindful of, not to enable the behavior, to be there,
Correct.
to provide support, so to help them with receiving the support that they need as individual, but not feeding that that desire and that disorder.
Right. So, when one is in fact told that you need to start clearing out the clutter, so to speak, not knowing that this is has an underlying bigger problem, that there's also conflict that arises from that, because in fact it's one of the symptoms. When there's conflict with others who
Mm,
try to reduce or remove clutter from your home. So I think that would be the first challenge,
y-
in terms of
yes.
the therapy, and knowing that there's a problem here.
Well, the first step to solving any problem is admitting that it exists. So if the person
True.
themselves doesn't see it as a problem, it will be very difficult to convince them. And in fact, if someone goes ahead and just starts clearing out the clutter for them, it may actually cause some very real pain and anxiety to the individual, in varying degrees depending on their strength. If they are old and frail, this could be something that would crush them.
Hmm.
So we have to approach it with wisdom and with patience, with empathy for this individual, because what they are, where they found they've landed in a very precarious situation, and it is something that requires wisdom and understanding to deal with. And
Hmm.
often we find that, especially with older people, the children just don't have the time or the patience to the word they would use is accommodate them, so they
Hmm.
just go ahead and clear out for them. And that
Right.
it's really sad. So if you get involved with a professional, get the person the help that they need, then they themselves will reach a place where they are okay with
And more
clearing out
accepting.
the clutter.
Right.
Yes, more
Uh,
accepting of
but,
that.
right. But what of a younger person that's capable of doing it themselves?
Well, if a person has a hoarding disorder, they would not be capable of doing it themselves, regardless of their age. But
Uh-huh.
we are, if we have someone like a teenager, teenagers don't have hoarding disorders. They can be quite lazy. They can be quite messy, disorganized. So this is where we would then teach them skills to be more organized, so they don't find themselves in that hole at a later stage. But obviously, if it was someone who was diagnosed with another mental disorder, right? So
Mm-hmm.
let's just say we have a teenager who is maybe diagnosed bipolar schizophrenic, and then
Okay.
they start exhibiting symptoms of hoarding. Then that may not be just because they're lazy or just because they're a slobber
Yeah,
teenager. That may need
absolutely.
a little bit more of a professional attention, because it's there's always underlying causes. So in
Correct.
the normal sense, we see the same situation, but it's a person who is normal and has their faculties of reasoning, and they are
Yes.
able to do something. And then we have someone who has a mental health illness, and because of that, even though they look the same, and we can't see the illness, we cannot see the disability that is within them, we often take for granted that they should behave in the same manner. But that's not always the case.
True.
And sometimes they may need special medical intervention to get them to that space where they are able to conduct themselves in a manner that we would see from what we would say, in inverted commas, a normal teenager.
Right. And I think understanding this would then avoid people who don't know what the
Mm,
disorder is all about becoming judgmental, because that's when the conflicts arise, and then
yes,
there's relationship issues. Some of the symptoms include avoiding social activities and employment
yes.
problems. So I mean, one would imagine that the home is where the clutter is. That's the first sort of picture that comes
Mm.
to mind. But then employment problems, would it be related to the underlying issue? Or it might also be that they're just as disorganized at work, or because there's a mental
Yes.
imbalance. Sorry, because there's an imbalance, they might not be
Mm.
as functional at work either.
No, definitely. If there is an imbalance, the person would not be fully functional in any situation. So it's not like they can leave their diagnosis as at home and then go to
Correct.
work and be a different person. You can't
Hmm.
do that. It would obviously translate from the work environment to the home environment and vice versa. Wherever, in their car, you would see stuff in their boot, on their back seats. So this is who they are. They are stuck in the situation. So some people may not even throw away, um, plastic bottles or something
Hmm.
that doesn't even make sense to anybody else. But
Right.
because this person has this disorder, they are incapable of doing it for themselves. So, for number one is for that person to become aware of those thoughts that are leading them to behave in this manner, and then
Yeah.
address those thoughts. So, from the Islamic perspective, we say waswasa. We say they would need a little spiritual treatment as well, together with the CBT and the journaling, right? And this would be
Right.
done under supervision of a professional. If they
Hmm.
need a little bit more intensive treatment, then that would then be organized for them. And then we
Hmm.
say we get outsiders involved, so family, friends, caregivers, to help them clear out the clutter. So it could be like stacks of newspapers that mean nothing, but so
Absolutely.
that could be thrown away, with once they start receiving treatment and are more open to it, that could just be thrown away. But where it's a person who has a collection, or they have attached meaning or sentiment to individual items, that may take a little bit more time, because this specific vase has this specific meaning for this specific reason, or this frame means something to this person. And we find a lot of this in old age, where the grandparent is alive and they may have lost their children, they may have lost grandchildren, so they have things that remind them of those people. So those things
Yes.
are kept in place, and the clutter around it is cleared out. So there's a lot of, we have to approach this with empathy and be able to see this from the perspective of the person that's sitting with the illness. What does
Mhm.
this mean to this person? It's all well and good to say, let me clear out the clutter and make your house neat and make your room neat, whatever, so that it's aesthetically pleasing to me as an outsider. But what about the person living in that situation? What works best for them?
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And that's the best way to approach the problem, as it were, right? So understanding it is very important. But for the patient, if you like, as well as the loved ones who actually have to witness this deterioration, if you like. And then, of course, we also have the reverse effect. When we say, when you clean out the clutter, there is a psychological cleansing, so to speak,
Mhm.
that happens, and that would be healthy for someone who doesn't even have any type of hoarding disorder or miserliness. Or so
Yes,
let's
yes.
just a little bit, just touch a little bit on the benefits of doing that. We talk about spring cleaning, the seasonal cleaning up, tidying up, throwing out the clutter. But there are so many important things that we need to remember in terms of creating that balance that you spoke about earlier. For example, um, driving into your garage, for example, our mainly garage becomes the storeroom, as it
Mhm.
were, right? And
The
so you're
storeroom.
coming in
Very
from,
true.
yeah, you're coming in from work, you're driving into your garage. Already, all of that untidiness has an impact on your mental state. So that's the first place that should actually be the tidiest. And then moving into your personal spaces, into the household. So I'm
Mhm.
changing the a little bit of the subject around hoarding itself, but of course,
Mhm.
just also focusing on the benefits of making sure that not making sure, but what
Mhm.
benefits us in terms of having our environments tidy, as it were.
Free of clutter, definitely.
Yeah.
No, what you're saying is true. It's, and we said we want to put structures in place that prevents a person from ending up in that helpless situation. So regularly cleaning out the clutter, excuse me, excuse me, regularly cleaning out the clutter is one of those ways that we can prevent a person ending up in a helpless situation.
Right.
So, for example, your bedroom should always be clear of clutter, even if your clutter is in your garage or somewhere where it's outside of your bedroom. But your bedroom should be your sanctuary. This is where you go to get away from everything, to get away from the world.
Right.
As far as possible, try not to have your office space or your workspace in your bedroom. If you're able to do it, move it out of the bedroom. If you're unable to, then just make sure that it's not cluttered. Because not only for yourself, if you're sharing the bedroom with a spouse, the clutter could have an effect there. So with children's rooms as well, their bedrooms should not be cluttered. They should not be eating in their rooms. There should not be dirty dishes in their rooms. From a young age, make sure that the bedroom is free from clutter, free from, stacks of books. If you are able to leave their study space outside the bedroom, and the bedroom is somewhere where, this is my space, it's clear, it's free from clutter. So like you said, this has an impact on the mental state. So when you are in your bedroom, when you are in your sanctuary, you do not want that cluttered feeling, that feeling that creates anxiety, or, it could create a fluttering feeling where you are not comfortable in your own bedroom. That is something that you can do. But regularly donating, again, we go back to Quran, and Allah Ta'ala says, give of what you love, so you donate clothing that you may still be wearing. You do not donate things that, just because a person is desperate and has no other option, they just forced to take it. Give of what you love, so that when a person receives it, it creates that happiness in their heart. And that happiness is what we regard as something that results in barakah and blessings in our life.
Absolutely.
So, regularly to take out clothing. When you buy new clothing in the summer, take out the pieces that you are, from winter. Don't wait for it to sit in your cupboard for years and years and years and get moldy and, little moth holes and whatever, and then decide to donate it or give it away. Yeah. So one of the thought processes, we think, I will use it one day. If you haven't used it in maybe 3 months or 6 months, you know what? When you need something, then you will find it. You can always, Allah Ta'ala has given us wealth. Allah Ta'ala has given us a position where if we need a jersey, we can go out and just buy one. So if you're not using it, give it away. If you don't fit into it anymore, and this is a big one. So women who put on weight, right? They hold on to those smaller sizes.
Okay.
Because there really is an attachment there. Hopefully I will fit into it one day. I will go back to that size one day. You know what? Give it away with the intention Allah Ta'ala will replace you with better, so that when you do get back to that size, you'll get a whole new wardrobe. So just give it away. Let it go.
Right. Is it that simple though?
No, it's not that simple. It's easy for me to say it. And I will be the first one to tell you that it's not that simple, especially if it's, pieces that you are comfortable wearing. And comfortable clothes is something that you can easily get attached to. But then we have that, our desire, our sensual desire from nafs that wants to hold on to it. And then we have the command of Allah to give of what you love. And then you say, you know what, Ya Allah, I will prioritize what you advise over and above my nafs. So yes, it's squashing on your nafs. And no, it's not. Nafs is not going to be happy. It's going to throw tantrums. And you know what? After you give it away, the next day you're going to realize, you know what? I actually needed that thing. Or the next week you'll come up and you look for it and you realize you gave it away. And yes, you are squashing on your nafs. And it's not something that's easy. It's not something that your nafs will enjoy. But then you say, you know what? Ya Allah, I do this for your love. I do this because this is your command. And the objective of our lives is to work from where we are to get closer to Allah Ta'ala. And the pathway, there are some thorns and potholes, and this is how we do it. But in the love of Allah Ta'ala, those things, pale in comparison to what He will give us in Jannah for, as a reward for what we gave. And the more it hurts, the more it tricks you, the greater the reward.
Alhamdulillah, I love that explanation. Is it easy to use the Islamic approach to treat clients?
You know, well, it's a two-pronged approach. So yes, it's easy, but it doesn't make for very good business practice, because once you connect your clients to Allah Ta'ala, once they become aware of fitra and moving towards it, they are, like, it's like letting a fish go into the ocean. They just swim off
Yes,
happily, and they may need you from time to time, but it's not something that where with other modalities you have to keep on coming every month for sessions. Here we teach them the tools and leave them to Allah Ta'ala, because that is the objective. So yeah, we give them the support that they need for that time, and then let them go. In the and Allah Ta'ala is the one who takes care of all of us. So we just make dua for them going on
right.
forward.
And do you succeed in that sense? Because it's very interesting to know that clinically we would, have to treat the client for a while.
Mm,
They might need minimum of 5 sessions. It's ongoing forms of treatment, etc.,
mm.
approaches to treatment. And then you have this approach, which then just nips it in the bud, and of course you give the tools are given.
Yes.
Is there a long lasting effect on that, or would it? Of course, I know that's quite
Well,
a
yeah, no,
rhetorical
it would
question.
depend.
Yeah,
It would depend on the maintenance from the individual, and
right.
our iman is something that fluctuates. So
Mm.
we constantly need to, renew our iman. But the reason we see such a success on this side is that secular psychology ignores a very, very big part of the human, and that is their soul. The
Right.
spiritual aspect of it.
Yeah.
And even though they have now adopted Eastern and other modules of spirituality, they still focus a lot on the emotional aspect. So that still keeps it within psychology, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
with Islam, we transcend that. The objective is to transcend. So Allah Ta'ala says, the friends of Allah, la khawfun alayhim wa lahum yahzanun. So fear and anxiety is something that
Mhm.
does not it's something that does not affect their day-to-day living, because the
Mhm.
objective is to transcend our emotional reaction to whatever we're going through, and see Allah Ta'ala through that emotional barrier. So that pulls us through. So now, if you look at the way people like Jordan Peterson, for example, he always speaks about this, and even um, other psychologists who are coming out. The names are just not coming to me right now, but they
Mm.
tell you that it's not what you are going through, it's how you respond and how you
Correct.
process what you are going through. So you can use that situation to develop a mental illness, because you are unable to digest, in inverted commas, what has happened to you, or you can process it in such a manner that it becomes a stepping stone for you to move higher in your field, higher towards your purpose. And in our as Muslims, that is closeness to Allah Ta'ala, right?
Yes.
And that once we are in alignment with the way our fitra was programmed, and Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said every child is born with their fitra, so we come pre-programmed. But when we live in a world that goes against everything, so our fitra is moving in one direction and everything around us is moving in another direction. And so that friction is what results in anxiety, in depression, in mental instability, in mental imbalance. So once we become aware of this and we start moving in alignment with our fitra, things fall into place. It's a cause and effect. This is what happens. And we work in alignment with fitra, and our focus is Allah Ta'ala and akhirah, and that
Right.
pulls us forward through all these emotional barriers, through all these emotional blocks. And you know what, I'm saying it to you again, I'm saying it's very easy for me to articulate what this is, but the practical application isn't so easy. So
Right.
when it comes to dealing with the Islamic perspective, we simply make people aware. So there's a lot of CBT that goes into it.
Yes.
There's a spiritual aspect as well, where we help the person connect to Allah Ta'ala, because Allah Ta'ala is the source of all the healing, the source of everything. So that person can draw directly from Allah Ta'ala, right? They don't even need us.
Indeed.
Once they learn the tools and the techniques, then, alhamdulillah, we've seen so much benefit in many people. Alhamdulillah.
Right. So I think more needs to be spoken about the Islamic approach to psychology, if you like. And we've had
Mm.
this, and I'm very well aware of the international groups and trends around this.
Yes,
And it's
yes.
wonderful that we have people with clinically, qualified degrees that are in fact integrating
Mm,
the two, which is amazing. But I think also, it's so misunderstood that, for example, if one speaks of depression and
mm,
we say, let's deal with it as Muslims as best as we
mm.
should, but then, there's a whole chemical imbalance there. And that's why you keep
Yes.
saying, and I
Mm,
agree with you 100% that yes, there has to be medical intervention where needed. So I think
yes.
Muslims need to understand that yes, while there is the most long lasting, the most reliable approach to this kind of disease through our, Islamic knowledge and practice. However, one has to understand that these disorders, like we're talking about hoarding, and I brought in depression because it's quite
Mm,
related, um,
yes.
can and must be treated in a clinical manner as well, because I think these diseases are very misunderstood. We normalize it in a sense, and that's where the problem is. And the normalizing, either normalizing or stigmatizing, it's a fine
Mm,
line between the two. And that is why I just love listening to you today on how you've integrated Islamic psychology into your practice. So more needs to be spoken about in this regard so that people can understand that when someone
mm.
like yourself talks about going into the practice of Quran and Hadith, conscientiously becoming aware from a soul
Yes.
level, then there's more benefit. In fact, it's long-term benefit. So in other words,
Yes,
what we
you've
always
mentioned.
say, yes, yes, and
Uh,
what we always say is that it's we treating the cause and not the symptom.
mm,
But the symptom sometimes is to be treated first in order for the cause to be
yes, to get to the
approached.
cause.
Yes, yes. Sorry, you were going to say.
But you mentioned a very important word, to become
Mm-hmm,
conscientiously aware. So,
mm-hmm,
there's a misunderstanding where, like you mentioned, if a person has um, depression, right? This depression could be caused by chemical imbalance, the same way diabetes is caused, right?
right.
So why is it that we tell a person with depression, oh, snap out of it, we are Muslims, we have Quran and Sunnah, you shouldn't be depressed? Would you say that to a
Exactly.
person who has diabetes? You would never say that. You would never tell a person, oh, you know what, you have diabetes because your iman is low.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
there are medical factors and there are environmental factors. And once
Correct.
and this is also something that we must address, and that is when people who don't have the knowledge speak beyond what they have been trained. So
Correct.
so you get a lot of these coaches who claim to do Islamic psychology, right? But what they mean is Muslim mental health, which is a completely different field. You can be a Muslim, you can be a psychologist, but if you have not trained in Islamic psychology from the professors who have extracted this teaching from Quran and Sunnah and the intellectual heritage of the early Muslim scholars, if you haven't actually studied the course, then you cannot claim to practice it, because there's a very specific course that you study. There's a very specific way in which it is implemented. And so a lay person doesn't know this, right? So they go to someone, and I have had clients who have, they come to me after going to other people, and then they see the difference and they say, no, but when I went to this person and this is what they said, and they give you Quran and Hadith, and then they will discourage you from seeking medical help. This is not
Ah,
part of Islamic psychology.
no, 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 no,
This is not
absolutely
part of
not.
it at all. In fact, this
Correct.
is dangerous. And Allah
Yes,
Ta'ala is so strict in warning about people. I mean, you're saying Islamic psychology, you're using Quran and Hadith. Allah Ta'ala warns people about saying about Allah that which they do not know. It causes real harm to people.
correct.
The most recent case that I had, a woman has been going to a marriage counselor for years and years, and same old story over and over again. And now, for us in Islamic psychology, if a person is in therapy for years and years and there's no improvement, that is a major red flag. right?
Mm.
And then, within a session, one of the red flags that was picked up is that the husband, has schizophrenia. Not that I diagnosed it, but the person is displaying these symptoms. And so I asked, and this woman literally broke down. And she said, I didn't know how to say this to you, but there is a family history, and this is what has happened. And, for so many years, no one's believed me, so I didn't want to say it to you. This poor woman has been suffering with an unmedicated schizophrenic because other people who claim to know better, who claim to be experts, were unable to pick up the problem.
Well, I think
Because,
that's yeah.
people
Finish.
are being harmed. People are suffering because people portray themselves to be certain experts in fields,
Yes.
which they are not.
Right. So I think this is why I'm so glad that we had this discussion today, not only because we spoke about the topic that was something that's ignored perhaps or not spoken enough about, but of course the importance of what you were saying now, and this is what I was trying to extract from this interview today, is that there is an importance on both sides, and you've articulated very, very well. So on that note, we're going to end this interview and just create more and more awareness through people like yourself, inshallah ta'ala. Jazakallah khair.
Inshallah. Ameen.
It's been
Jazakallah for having me.
wonderful talking to you, Muhammad. All the best in everything that you do, inshallah.
Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.